I should have known something was wrong when my parents started the conversation by telling me how proud they were of my work ethic. Emma, you've always been so responsible, Mom said, sliding a stack of papers across our kitchen table. Your brother David really needs our help right now, and we know you'll understand. The papers were loan documents. Student loan documents with my name typed neatly in the borrower section. David sat next to them, scrolling through his phone like this conversation had nothing to do with him. Medical school is expensive, Dad explained, adjusting his reading glasses. David's been accepted to his dream program, but the financial aid isn't covering everything. We need someone with good credit to co-sign and well. He gestured vaguely toward David, who was now taking selfies. What about your credit? I asked, though I already knew the answer. They'd refinanced the house twice to fund David's undergraduate degree, his gap year in Europe, and his failed attempt at a music career. Our debt-to-income ratio is a bit high right now, Mom said delicately. But you have that steady income from the restaurant and your credit score is excellent. I looked at the numbers on the loan documents. $47,000 per year. 4 years of medical school. Nearly $200,000 total. This is a lot of money, I said slowly. It's an investment, Dad said firmly. In your brother's future. In our family's future. Think about it, Dr. David Martinez. Doesn't that sound wonderful? David finally looked up from his phone. Yeah, thanks, Emma. You're the best sister ever. Then he went back to his screen. I stared at the loan documents, remembering how I'd been working 3 jobs since I was 16. The breakfast shift at Mel's Diner, afternoon hours at the campus bookstore, and weekend nights waitressing at Romano's. I'd been saving every tip, every extra dollar, hoping to maybe go back to school myself someday. What about my education? I asked quietly. Oh honey, Mom said, reaching over to pat my hand. You're doing so well already. You don't need a degree to be successful. Look how hard you work. Besides, someone in the family needs to be practical. That stung. I'd had a 3.8 GPA in high school. I'd gotten into 3 different universities. But when David decided he wanted to go to an expensive private school, suddenly there was no money left for my education. Community college is always an option, Dad added helpfully. Very affordable. Very practical. I looked around our kitchen, taking in the new granite countertops they'd installed last month for David's graduation party, the expensive espresso machine David had insisted he needed for studying, and the brand new BMW in the driveway that was his pre-med reward. Meanwhile, I was still driving the 2003 Honda Civic I'd bought with my waitressing money. Can I think about it? I asked. Of course, sweetheart, Mom said. But the deadline for accepting the loan is tomorrow, so don't think too long. That night, I sat in my tiny studio apartment, the cheapest place I could find within commuting distance of all 3 jobs, and stared at those loan documents. $200,000. Even with minimum payments, I'd be paying this back for the next 20 years. But David was family. And family helps family. That's what Mom and Dad had always told me. So I signed the papers. The next 4 years were a blur of exhaustion and sacrifice. While David posted Instagram photos from medical school parties and spring break trips, I worked 70-hour weeks to make loan payments and cover my own basic expenses. I ate ramen noodles and generic cereal while he complained about the terrible cafeteria food at his medical school. When David needed extra money for a study abroad program in his 3rd year, they came to me again. It's just $8,000 more, Mom said. And it's such a great opportunity for him. I took out another loan. When David needed a new laptop because his old one was too slow for medical research, they came to me again. Just $3,000, Dad said. He really needs the latest technology. I maxed out my credit card. When David needed money for his board exam fees, interview travel costs, and a new wardrobe for residency interviews, they came to me again. This is the final stretch, Mom promised. Just $12,000 more and then he'll be earning a doctor's salary. I borrowed against my 401k. Meanwhile, my own life was on permanent hold. I'd applied to nursing school twice but had to withdraw both times because I couldn't afford to cut back my work hours for classes. I was 26 years old with no savings, no degree, and debt that felt like a mountain I'd never climb. But David was going to be a doctor. That was worth it, right? The breaking point came during David's medical school graduation party. Mom and Dad had rented out the entire back room at Romano's, the same restaurant where I waited tables. I was working that night, serving champagne and appetizers to my own family's celebration. I watched David laugh with his medical school friends, talking about his upcoming residency at a prestigious hospital. I heard him tell people about his plans to specialize in dermatology because the lifestyle is better and the money is incredible. And then I heard him talking to his girlfriend. "Yeah, my parents really supported my dreams," he was saying loud enough for everyone to hear. "They sacrificed so much to help me get through medical school. I'm so lucky to have family who believed in me." His girlfriend nodded sympathetically. "That must have been hard on them financially." "Oh, not really," David said, waving his hand dismissively. "My sister covered most of it. She's got this whole martyrdom complex, always wants to be the hero. Honestly, I think she likes feeling needed." My hands started shaking as I balanced a tray of drinks. "That's so nice of her though," his girlfriend said. David shrugged. "I guess. I mean, it's not like she was going to do anything important with the money anyway. She's just a waitress. This way at least it went toward something meaningful." The tray slipped from my hands, sending glasses crashing to the floor. The entire room went quiet and turned to look at me. "Sorry," I mumbled, kneeling to pick up the broken glass. "I'll clean this up." Mom rushed over, more concerned about the disruption to David's party than the fact that I was bleeding from a glass cut on my hand. "Emma, please be more careful," she whispered urgently. "This is David's special day." That night, after the party ended and I'd finished cleaning up, I sat in my car in the restaurant parking lot and cried. 26 years old, $60,000 in debt, working 3 jobs to pay for my brother's dream while my own life disappeared one payment at a time. But as I sat there, something shifted inside me. The hurt began to crystallize into something else. Clarity. I drove home and opened my laptop. If I was going to sacrifice everything for David's education, I was going to document exactly what that sacrifice looked like. I started with the original loan documents and created a spreadsheet. Every payment, every interest charge, every late fee when I couldn't quite make the deadline. I printed out bank statements going back 4 years. I organized receipts from the additional loans, the credit card charges, the 401k withdrawal. Then I expanded my documentation. Screenshots of David's social media posts from expensive restaurants and vacation trips. Photos of the BMW, the laptop, the designer clothes I'd helped pay for. Emails where my parents asked for just a little more help for David's expenses. I documented my own finances too. The student loan payments that took up 40% of my income. The credit card debt from covering David's emergency expenses. The fact that I hadn't been able to afford health insurance for 2 years. The college applications I'd had to abandon because I couldn't afford to reduce my work hours. Most importantly, I started saving every conversation, every text message, every email that showed how my family really viewed our arrangement. Like the text from Mom, "Don't mention David's spring break trip to your father. He thinks you're only helping with tuition." Or Dad's email, "Emma's always been the practical one. She doesn't need the things David needs." Or David's response when I'd asked him about making some of the loan payments himself. "Oh, Emma, I'm in medical school. I don't have time for a job. That's what family is for." For 6 months, I continued working my 3 jobs and making loan payments while quietly building my case. I consulted with a lawyer about my options. I opened a separate bank account that my family didn't know about. And I started making some changes. I applied for nursing school again, but this time I found a program that offered evening and weekend classes. I was accepted and started taking out financial aid in my own name, for my own education. I also started networking in ways I'd never done before. Romano's served a lot of business dinners and I began really talking to customers instead of just taking their orders. I learned about different career paths, about companies that offered tuition assistance, about opportunities I'd never known existed. One customer, a woman named Patricia who worked in pharmaceutical sales, took a particular interest in my story. "You know," she said one evening as I served her table, "my company is looking for someone with your work ethic for a sales position. The base salary is $45,000 plus commission. Full benefits, tuition reimbursement, company car." I nearly dropped her drink. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. You've been serving my business dinners for months and you're always professional, knowledgeable, and you clearly understand customer service. That's exactly what we need. 3 weeks later, I gave notice at all 3 of my jobs and started my new career in pharmaceutical sales. The company car alone saved me $300 a month. The health insurance was better than anything I'd ever had. And for the first time in years, I had weekends free. But I didn't tell my family about any of this. When David started his residency, the loan payments became my responsibility entirely. My parents made it clear that they expected me to continue paying while David got established in his career. Residents don't make much money, Mom explained during one of our monthly family dinners. It would be really unfair to burden David with these payments right when he's starting his medical career. How long until he starts helping with payments? I asked. Oh, probably not until he finishes his residency, Dad said. Maybe when he starts his fellowship. Or when he gets into private practice. These things take time. David nodded seriously. Yeah, Emma, I really appreciate you carrying this. Don't worry. Once I'm making real doctor money, I'll totally pay you back. I smiled and said I understood. But by then I'd done the math. David's residency would be 4 years. His dermatology fellowship would be another year. Even after that, he'd want to get established and build up his practice. I was looking at least 7 more years of payments, probably longer. Meanwhile, my new job was going incredibly well. My natural customer service skills translated perfectly to pharmaceutical sales, and my work ethic impressed everyone. Within 6 months, I was the top performer in my region. Within a year, I'd been promoted to a senior sales role with a base salary of $68,000 plus commission. I was making more money than I'd ever imagined, but my family didn't need to know that. The turning point came during David's second year of residency. He'd been complaining about his small apartment and had found a perfect 2-bedroom place that was $800 more per month in rent. The thing is, Mom said during our usual monthly dinner, David's salary can't really cover the increase. We were hoping you could help with maybe $600 a month, just until he gets his attending position. I looked around the table. David was nodding eagerly, already mentally decorating his new apartment. Dad was pulling out his calculator, probably figuring out how to make this seem reasonable. Mom was giving me her special, "We're all counting on you" smile. That's $7,000 a year, I said slowly. It's an investment in David's mental health, Mom said. Doctors need to live in nice places. It affects their professional image. David jumped in. Plus, Emma, you should see this place. It has a gym and a pool. Maybe you could come over and use them sometimes. It would be like I'm sharing with you. The generosity of allowing me to occasionally use amenities I'd be paying for was apparently supposed to seal the deal. I smiled. Can I think about it? Sure, Dad said, but David needs to give them an answer by Friday. That night I made a decision. It was time. I called Patricia, my mentor from the pharmaceutical company, and told her everything. She listened to the whole story, and when I finished she was quiet for a long moment. Emma, she said finally, you need a lawyer. The next day, Patricia introduced me to her attorney, a sharp woman named Jennifer who specialized in family financial abuse cases. What you're describing is a pattern of financial exploitation, Jennifer told me after reviewing my documentation. Your parents have essentially made you an involuntary guarantor for your brother's lifestyle, with no legal protections and no clear timeline for repayment. She explained my options. I could try to get David added to the loans officially, making him legally responsible for payments. I could pursue family mediation. Or I could take a more dramatic approach. Given the amount of money involved and the clear documentation you have, Jennifer said, we could arrange for a family meeting where we present the facts and discuss a formal repayment plan. Sometimes seeing everything laid out professionally helps families understand the reality of what's been happening. I thought about David's graduation party, about his comments about my martyrdom complex, about the fact that he'd never once thanked me directly for the sacrifices I'd made. Let's schedule the meeting, I said. I told my family that I wanted to discuss our financial arrangement at our next monthly dinner, and that I'd invited a family friend who was a lawyer to help us organize everything professionally. That sounds very responsible, Dad said approvingly. It's good to keep proper records. They had no idea what was coming. Jennifer arrived at my parents' house on Sunday afternoon carrying a leather briefcase and a folder thick with documentation. My entire family was there. Mom, Dad, David, and David's girlfriend Sarah, who had basically become part of the family. Thank you all for agreeing to this meeting, Jennifer said professionally. Emma has asked me to help clarify the financial arrangements surrounding David's medical education so that everyone understands the current situation and can plan for the future. She opened her folder and began laying out documents on the dining room table. Over the past 4 years, Emma has paid a total of $73,412 toward David's medical education and related expenses, Jennifer began reading from her summary. This includes the original student loans, supplemental loans for study abroad programs, equipment purchases, exam fees, and living expense assistance. The room was completely silent. David had stopped smiling. The current outstanding balance on the loans in Emma's name is $61,800, Jennifer continued. At the current payment rate, Emma will be making these payments for approximately 18 more years, with total interest costs of an additional $42,000. She pulled out a calculator and showed her work on a legal pad. This means Emma's total financial contribution to David's medical education will be approximately $115,000 over 22 years. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. I could see them doing math in their heads. Now, Jennifer said, let's look at Emma's financial sacrifice in context. She laid out my old pay stubs from the restaurant jobs, showing my income during David's medical school years. Emma was earning approximately $28,000 per year while making these payments. This means that 62% of her gross income was going toward David's education and expenses. She pulled out another document. For comparison, David's current resident salary is $54,000 per year. When he completes his dermatology fellowship, his expected starting salary will be approximately $280,000 per year. The numbers hung in the air like accusations. I've also documented the additional sacrifices Emma has made, Jennifer continued, pulling out more papers. She has been unable to pursue her own education, has no savings or retirement funds, and has been living below the poverty line while funding David's lifestyle. She showed them photos I'd taken of my studio apartment next to screenshots of David's social media posts from expensive restaurants and trips. Finally, Jennifer said, I have documentation of the family's acknowledgement of this arrangement. She began reading from emails and text messages. Mom's request for just a little more help for David's spring break trip. Dad's comment about Emma being the practical one. David's dismissive response about not needing to get a job during medical school. And then the piece de resistance. She played a recording I'd made on my phone during David's graduation party, where he clearly stated that I had a martyrdom complex, and was just a waitress, who wasn't going to do anything important with the money anyway. When the recording ended, you could have heard a pin drop. David's face had gone completely pale. Emma, I didn't mean. The purpose of this meeting, Jennifer interrupted smoothly, is to establish a formal repayment plan so that Emma can begin building her own financial future. She pulled out a proposed agreement she'd prepared. Given David's current and projected income, we're proposing that he take over all loan payments immediately, with a schedule to reimburse Emma for payments already made. The total repayment amount would be $73,412, plus reasonable interest. Dad found his voice first. This is ridiculous. We're a family. We don't need lawyers and contracts. Actually, Jennifer said calmly, you do. Because the current arrangement is unsustainable and legally problematic. Emma has essentially been providing David with an interest-free loan of over $70,000 with no legal protection and no clear repayment terms. Mom turned to me with tears in her eyes. Emma, honey, how could you bring a stranger into our family business like this? Because, I said quietly, our family business has been destroying my life for 4 years and no one seemed to care. That's not true, David said desperately. I care. I always planned to pay you back. When? Jennifer asked directly. Do you have a specific timeline? A specific amount you plan to pay monthly? David stuttered and looked around the room for support. Well, I mean after my residency and then maybe after fellowship. So in approximately 6 years, Jennifer summarized. And what amount did you plan to pay monthly? I don't know. Whatever I could afford. Jennifer nodded and made a note. So no specific timeline, no specific amount, and no legal obligation. This is exactly the problem. He turned back to the family. Emma has been essentially providing David with a $70,000 interest-free loan with no terms and no legal protection. No bank would ever agree to such an arrangement. The room erupted in defensive arguments. Mom accused me of being money-obsessed and destroying the family. Dad insisted that this is what families do for each other. David kept saying he'd always planned to pay me back as if good intentions were enough. But Jennifer calmly addressed each point with documentation. She showed them exactly how much I'd sacrificed, exactly how much David had benefited, and exactly how unfair the arrangement had been from the beginning. The bottom line, she said finally, is that Emma has a legal right to repayment of these loans. She can either work with you to establish reasonable terms, or she can pursue other options. What other options? Dad asked suspiciously. Jennifer smiled. Emma could transfer the loans to David's name, since they were taken out for his benefit. She could pursue a civil lawsuit for repayment. Or she could simply stop making payments and let David deal with the consequences to his credit rating. The room went dead silent as the implications sank in. David's medical career depended on maintaining good credit for licensing and hospital privileges. If the loans went into default, it would destroy his professional reputation before it even began. You wouldn't do that, Mom said, but her voice was uncertain. I looked around the table at my family, the people who had treated my financial sacrifice as an entitlement, who had dismissed my dreams as unimportant, who had never once acknowledged the true cost of what I'd given up. I don't want to, I said. But I need to protect my own future. I can't keep paying for David's choices while my own life disappears. Jennifer pulled out the formal agreement again. This is a reasonable solution. David takes over the loan payments immediately. He reimburses Emma for past payments over a 5-year period at fair market interest rates. Everyone moves forward with clear expectations. She set the papers in the middle of the table. I'll give you 1 week to decide, I said, standing up. Either David signs this agreement, or I stop making loan payments and you can figure out alternative arrangements. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and there's one more thing you should know, I said. I'm not a waitress anymore. I haven't been for over a year. I'm a pharmaceutical sales rep making $87,000 a year, plus commission. Last month alone, I made more than David makes in 3 months of his residency. I paused to let that sink in. I've also been accepted to nursing school and will graduate with my BSN in 18 months. My company is paying for the entire program. The look of shock on their faces was almost worth 4 years of sacrifice. The difference between David and me, I continued, is that I didn't need anyone else to sacrifice their future for my success. I did it myself. Jennifer packed up her briefcase with professional efficiency. You have my contact information, she told the room. Please let me know your decision by next Sunday. We left them sitting around the dining room table in stunned silence. 6 days later, David called me. Emma, he said, and his voice was different. Smaller. I signed the agreement. Jennifer has all the paperwork. Good, I said. I also want you to know. I'm getting a part-time job. At a medical clinic. To help with the payments. This was something David had never considered before. Working while in residency was difficult but not impossible. I never realized, he continued quietly. I never understood how much you gave up. Sarah helped me do the math and, Emma, you basically lived in poverty so I could go to medical school. I was quiet, letting him process. I'm sorry, he said. I'm really, really sorry. And I'm going to make this right. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. We talked for a few more minutes, and for the first time in years, it felt like I was talking to my brother instead of a financial obligation. Mom and Dad took longer to come around. They were hurt that I'd ambushed them with lawyers and documentation. They felt betrayed that I'd been keeping secrets about my career success. But they also couldn't argue with the numbers. When Jennifer laid out exactly how much I'd sacrificed and exactly how little they'd appreciated it, the reality was undeniable. The formal loan transfer took 3 months to complete. David officially took over all payments, and we established a clear schedule for him to reimburse me for past payments. For the first time in 4 years, my paycheck was actually mine. The family dynamics took longer to heal. There were awkward dinners and stilted conversations as everyone adjusted to the new reality that I was no longer the family's financial safety net. But something unexpected happened. As David started making his own payments and working to reimburse me, he began to understand the true value of what I'd given him. He became more grateful, more thoughtful, more aware of the sacrifices others made for his benefit. Mom and Dad struggled more with the change. They'd gotten used to having me as their solution to David's financial needs, and they didn't like losing that control. But they also couldn't deny that their treatment of me had been unfair. The real transformation in our relationship came 6 months later, when I graduated from nursing school. David surprised me by showing up to the ceremony with flowers and a card. "I know this is 4 years late," he said, "but I wanted to be here for your graduation since you were there for all of mine." Inside the card he'd written, "Thank you for believing in my dreams even when no one believed in yours. I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how grateful I am." That night my family took me out to dinner to celebrate, and for the first time ever David insisted on paying. Today, 3 years later, our relationship has found a new balance. David finished his residency and started his dermatology fellowship. He's been making his loan payments faithfully and has already reimbursed me for about half of my original contributions. More importantly, he's become an advocate for my success instead of a drain on my resources. When I decided to pursue my nurse practitioner degree, David was the first to offer encouragement and support. Mom and Dad have slowly learned to see me as more than just the practical daughter who solves everyone else's problems. They've started asking about my career, my goals, my happiness, not just my ability to help with family financial crises. I'm thriving. I finished my nursing degree with honors while continuing to excel in pharmaceutical sales. I've been promoted twice and now manage a team of 12 sales reps across 3 states. I bought my own house last year. A real house with a yard and a mortgage, not a tiny studio apartment. Most importantly, I learned to value my own dreams as much as I'd valued everyone else's. I learned that saying no to exploitation isn't selfish, it's necessary. And I learned that real family supports each other's success instead of demanding that one person sacrifice everything for everyone else's benefit. The student loans that once felt like chains around my ankles became the catalyst for the most important lesson of my life. My financial well-being, my education, and my future matter just as much as anyone else's. And no one gets to convince me otherwise ever again.